The Batman movie by Tim Burton came out in 1989, and believe it or not, it was not the only thing that happened to Batman that year. Welcome to the Modern Bat, where we take a look at the history of Batman since 1986. Without a doubt, this movie is by far the most important thing that happened in 1989, launching Batman to unseen levels of popularity and changing the history of the Dark Knight as well as superheroes in Hollywood. This film was a milestone, like they'd never seen before, but I can't spend the rest of the video talking about it, because there were many other things that happened in 1989, like the storyline called Blind Justice, which was written by Sam Hamm, the writer of the Batman movie. Okay, it's going to be one of those, huh? Alrighty then. Blind Justice was a special story to celebrate 50 years of Batman. Sam Hamm was the writer, and the art was done by Dennis Cowan, and if there's anything I could say about that story, is that it's too similar to Nightfall. Blind Justice was published as a three-part story that culminated in Detective Comics number 600, and after that, the main creative team returned to the title. Alan Grant and Norm Breyfogle returned to Detective Comics with the iconic team-up of Batman and Etrigan, a storyline that reached record sales numbers thanks to the release of the Batman movie. Oh my days, it's everywhere! According to Alan Grant, when we first started on it, Detective was selling 75,000 issues, and suddenly the Burton movie was released and sales shot up to 650,000 for the 3 issues with the demon in them. Alan Grant and Norm Breyfogle followed up that story with The Mud Pack, the most underappreciated Clayface story of all time. Then came Anarchy, one of the last new characters from the 1980s, and they finished 1989 with a Penguin story. They went with the Penguin in this last story in order to boost the popularity of the character, since there were already rumors that the Penguin was going to be the main enemy in the sequel to the Batman movie. I promise you there's other things besides that. For example, over in Batman, Christopher Priest wrote a couple of issues that dealt with Batman mourning the death of Jason Todd and fighting ninjas. John Byrne came after with a 3-part story called The Many Deaths of Batman, an interesting idea that is weirdly executed. After that, Marv Wolfman delivered Batman Year 3, the first modern retelling of the origin story of Dick Grayson as Robin. The only downside to this otherwise amazing story is the stiff art of Pat Broderick. Marv Wolfman was the main Batman writer in 1989, and his final storyline of the year was Batman, A Lonely Place of Dying. A year had passed since a death in the family, and the Batman comics were already on the lookout for a new Robin. Marv Wolfman created A Lonely Place of Dying as the story that introduced Tim Drake to the Batman mythos, the introduction of the new Robin. Even though Tim Drake first appeared in Batman Year 3, it wasn't until A Lonely Place of Dying that this character was properly introduced, and he was named after Tim Burton, the director of the holy Batman movies. As you can see, the influence of this movie cannot be denied. This movie changed everything, from the way Batman was perceived in mainstream media around the world to the merchandise that people consumed, and of course, the Batman comics. The demand for Batman products was so high that DC Comics was able to publish a new Batman title for the first time in almost 50 years. The title was called Batman, Legends of the Dark Knight, and it was a series where the writers and artists could create stories outside of the main comics continuity. The first of these stories was Batman Shaman, a story that explored the moments in the early career of Batman that we didn't get to see in Year 1. Legends of the Dark Knight was one of the first series to feature long-form storylines, with Shaman being a 5-issue series, and subsequent stories following the same format. The release of Legends was a success, and the series continued for almost 2 decades, but it was only possible thanks to the Batman movie. It's clear that 1989 was dominated by Michael Keaton and his new compelling take on the character. DC even created a comic adaptation of the film, which was quite faithful to the source material, with only minor changes from the final cut of the film. The comic was adapted by Denny O'Neil and Jerry Ordway, who make a great work of translating the story from the screen to the pages. The Batman movie was everywhere, but I refuse to believe that everything was connected to it. The Batman and Detective comic annuals, for instance, had nothing to do with the movie, which is probably why they are not significant or relevant in any way, shape or form. The Batman Annual features a very obscure Two-Face story, and the Detective Comics Annual features a controversial story. You can get the gist of it just by looking at the cover. One of the writers of that story was Brian Augustine, who was also the writer of The Only Great Thing That Happened in 1989, that was not connected whatsoever to the Batman movie. Brian Augustine wrote Batman, Gotham by Gaslight, a graphic novel that takes place in the 18th century and proposes the idea of Batman versus Jack the Ripper. This idea was so unique, outrageous, and greatly executed that it became the template for the future Elseworlds imprint. Gotham by Gaslight is the first unofficial Elseworlds story, and thanks to the art of Mike Mignola, it has gained an enormous reputation among comic book fans. In my opinion, it is the most important highlight of the Batman comics of 1989. But there is another publication that some people think is better. A young British writer called Grant Morrison teamed up with Dave McKean, who was known for his unusual art style, and they delivered Arkham Asylum, a serious house on serious earth. This graphic novel tells the story of the most infamous mental institution in fiction from a psychological point of view. It explores the dark corners of Batman's mind and his rogues gallery in a very moody and symbolic story, full of flashbacks to the origins of Arkham and with some of the most bizarre visual storytelling that Batman fans had ever seen up until then. It is no secret that I don't enjoy Arkham Asylum, as it pretends to be a greater story than it actually is, but part of my dislike also comes from the fact that it became the best-selling Batman graphic novel of all time. And I think that would not have been possible if it wasn't because of the Batman movie. The Batmania of 1989 caused people to buy and consume anything and everything about Batman, all of the time. The demand for Batman products was titanic, and as we have discussed all throughout this video, it also included the comics. Without a doubt, the success of Arkham Asylum is largely due to the Batman movie, as it got thousands of readers into buying the book, inflating the sales numbers and spreading the word about this daring and bold story that subverted expectations. So, in short, 1989 was the year of the Bat. The year of the Batman movie, that is. It's impossible to talk about this year and not mention this excellent piece of cinema, which influenced the Batman history beyond 1989. The Batman movie, two outstanding graphic novels, a new comic book series and a new Robin are all the relevant things that happened during 1989 in the Batman history. And the modern Bat will continue with 1990. The start of a new decade. If you don't want to miss that one, please subscribe and spread the word about this little channel. Also, a big thanks to my Patreons for the support and a special shout out to all of you who watch the videos all the way to the end. Remember that you can always follow me on Twitter at Salazar. Friends, thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.